C-Note Show today, your daily playbook for sex, confidence, and masculine leadership with myself, Jeff Allen, and Cynthia Cruz. And we love this. Here, men in relationship hell get both a man and a woman's perspective so that he can stop, let's say, catching the skin of his ball sack on the zipper of his footy pajamas. You know, you don't want to do that. You don't want to catch the skin of your ball sack on your footy pajama zipper. That's not fun. Right, Cynthia?
Yeah, that happens to me often, and every time it's just like, ah!
Yeah, that's exactly how guys react to, ah, man, woo, baby, especially when I'll not elaborate. I was about to elaborate there. I don't think I need to. And so we have questions that were on the forum. Looks like we have men in today that are going to ask questions live, which is phenomenal, of course. And our theme of this week is trust. When will she trust me again? What does she mean when she says, I'm not ready to trust you? And this was, we started talking about this yesterday. Roger, one of our callers, asked, when should I go for it? Right? When should I just go for it? So those are some prompting questions of our theme of trust for the week. And on that note, we're going to start with some humor. I pulled this from, I'm not sure, it looks like Wayne's World 1. I have clips this week from 1 and 2. And today, here we go.
Hi. Hey, how's it going, Garth? Hi. Good.
Hey, there she is.
I must have slipped. Wayne, what do you do if every time you see this one incredible woman, you think you're gonna hurl?
I say hurl. If you blow chunks and she comes back, she's yours. If you spew and she bolts, it was never meant to be.
I'm not ready yet. I gotta be comfortable with me first.
Why don't you just go talk to her? Talk to her. Talk to her. Talk to her. Talk to her.
I'm coming to get you.
Why don't you just go talk to her? 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 Garth?
There you go. I love it. So I don't know if you caught it, but before he had the dream, he said, I'm not ready. I need to be, comfortable with me first. Yeah. So I need to be comfortable with me first. And they're just encouraging him to basically act on what he believes to be real for him, act on his own values, his belief, his wants in that moment. He's a hell yes in that moment for wanting to meet that woman. And he waits too long. He waits past like the 3 or 4 second window and puts up the nice excuse of, well, I'm not ready. I need to be comfortable with me. And whether you're approaching a woman or approaching your spouse with a conversation that you feel you need to have, or just being honest about how you feel in a healthy way, of course, in a calm, collected, calibrated way, you can't make an excuse and back out of it. Right? That's the nice guy syndrome of not wanting to upset her or anticipating some irrational outcome that actually isn't real. It isn't going to happen. And if you don't share your truth with her, how can she trust you? That's how that clip reminds me of, how could a woman trust you if you won't follow through on what you believe to be true and what you want? So Cynthia, how does that hit you when I say that? By the way, I want to have you comment on, so I love how he's pelvic thrusting toward her. And I think that's what every man is afraid that she's going to think we're doing, number one. And number two, he's kind of actually thinking that in his head some of the time. Like, he's pelvic thrusting toward her. But at least he's being honest in that dream. He's being honest and approaching her in a funny way. He put on some music, which I was dancing to. So what do you think about a man holding back his truth? Or the opposite side of that would be, he does try to offer his truth, but maybe he's pelvic thrusting and it's a little bit uncalibrated, right? What do you see when a man does that with you?
Gosh, that makes me think a lot about, I'll just go right to the bedroom. When I experience a man just being fully authentic with me, with what he's wanting, with the sounds he's even making, with what he desires with me. That is like the biggest turn on ever. So to me, authenticity really inspires me to open up and trust and surrender. So I think, like, in, if we go out of the bedroom into regular life, authenticity is a magnifying force. It, pulls a woman toward a man. But I think where, and vice versa, like authenticity in a woman is what makes her attractive. I think where we get a little stuck is if we're working on our authenticity, but we're not quite tapped into, what exactly is like my purpose in this interaction? And am I trying to push down a want or need that I have, and I'm trying to act in a different way? I think that's when just the energy of uncertainty and trying to maybe hide one part of ourselves, that's when it comes across to, I think it comes across to women, like, I'm so in tune with you energetically, but I'm not quite sure what you're saying. And then I think for men, like, I've experienced this in my own life when I've tried to tamper down, part of my authenticity. It's like I lose kind of a sheen and a lightness to myself, and I come across as kind of heavy and unattractive. So I've experienced that in my own life.
And what do you think of a man who is not either able or not able to even understand what he really wants to be authentic, like you said? How does that come across?
It's I guess, for as a woman, like, I'm paying attention to my body right now. It's kind of like off-putting. Like, if I'm kind of trying to gauge his purpose with me, what he's really asking me, it seems clouded, and I feel on edge. Like, I need to kind of, have a little bit of a protective shield until I'm really clear about what's going on.
Oh, wow, that's huge. So it's almost this automatic feeling like you have to have a shield up. If he is even uncertain within himself, you feel that.
Absolutely. And sometimes that uncertainty, I think, to a woman, if a man is a little uncertain in himself, it can come across a little bit like he's angry or frustrated. And so then there's that kind of response of like, okay, what is he angry at me? Did I do something wrong? I've also experienced sometimes if a man is feeling confused by me, like his like scrunched up face and trying to figure out, almost looks like it can come across as disgust. So I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, like what is he disgusted in me about?
Oh my gosh. So you automatically maybe think it's something wrong with you, or just as a human standing across from that person feeling that, you're wondering if they have a concern about you or they're not certain about you. I
Yeah.
love what you said about the facial expression. I've actually Dennis Collins and I led a retreat in Phoenix, Arizona just this March. And in that retreat and the others that we do, one of the facial expression exercises that I do and that we do together is when we're confused, just like you said, Cynthia. And what I like to do is I like to put my finger right in between between my eyes, under my forehead right here, and just scrunch my face into that, right? And I wonder why. There's another gentleman, John, on here today. He's got the exact same shirt on that I do. I wonder why John has the exact same shirt on. And if I just take my finger away, if I'm not smiling because it's funny, but if I just wonder, why does he have the same? It looks like I'm being really judgmental when I'm just confused. And so this helps me remind myself that if I'm confused, number one, be aware, maybe break eye contact. Dennis, I know guys on here want pragmatic, suggestions and skills and tools. And one of those I have is, well, first of all, you got to be aware. And if you're confused, maybe look away from the person, because if I'm confused down here, it doesn't look like I'm disgusted with you. I'm just confused. But if I'm looking at you and I'm confused, it's incredibly confusing, and I'm sure that can come across. So yeah, Dennis, what are some of the tools that we use, and what's your impression with that?
Well, it's interesting. I used to get told that I was angry at work. People go, you always look angry. And it wasn't that I was angry. I was preoccupied thinking of the 10 things I had to get done and only enough time for 5. And I was the guy who said hello to everyone in the morning. And but once I was there and started working, they're like, he's all pissed off. So I think others perceive you, like you said, you're not even aware. So you need to, for me, it's about smiling, because when I'm preoccupied, I don't smile. And I've become aware of that. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm a pretty optimistic, happy guy. But when I get preoccupied, this look comes on my face, and I'm very aware of it when I'm with other women as well, because I try to be me as much as the balloon man as possible, and understand that the guys need to not focus always on the energy coming at them as to what's causing the energy. They can be frustrated with a lot of things. It's often not about them. And, we have to be aware, and we talked about this on my Coffee and Conversation. If I'm a little frustrated with you, Jeff, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 1. That anger, that frustration, you perceive it as a 1, I perceive it as a 1. If I am then talking with Cynthia and have that same level of frustration, a little bit of anger, Cynthia's perceiving it on a completely different scale. And I had, they see that little bit of anger as a lot more. And I had this conversation with a woman on Saturday, and she said, deep down, while we don't think you'll do that, we know you physically can harm us. She said it's biology. She said her ex never hit her, but she said he would get angry and have the closed fists and they were shaking, and she always wondered, is this the time he's going to hit me?
Wow.
And I thought, what a horrible place to be in. To think, and I look back to my first marriage, and when I wasn't retreating from conflict, when I was angry, I think I never thought about the way that's perceived, or that little bit of annoyance and anger and how that's perceived. So that's something I think we need to be aware of as men.
Yeah, I agree completely. I had what I call the Hulk, where the energy shoots up the back of my neck, and I have about 3 seconds to kind of disengage or take a break or realize what's going on before I did the accusational, disgusted face. And that's something I had to work on a lot myself. Cynthia, how does it hit you when a man like Dennis or when myself say, yeah, wow, my frustration or my anger may come across completely differently to the woman in my life than it did 5 minutes ago at the office?
Well, I really appreciate Dennis's sharing, because that's a very tender thing to speak of in our culture, especially at a time when, men are really being so conscious about their energy, and then they have women who are kind of biting back and going like this with them. I really resonate with that. We all are, cavemen and cavewomen deep down inside, that we haven't evolved so much further in terms of that our biology still reacts that way. So, there's men who might relate to this, but definitely as a woman, I grew up being told, like, don't be too sensitive. Or if a male teacher or like a woman teacher in her masculine was, had a certain face or tone with me, that, like it was something I did wrong. you take this, you're being too sensitive, don't take that so hard. Don't take that personally. I think the freedom in recognizing that, we do have different biology, and, men have more testosterone and women have more estrogen, is that we can then talk about it, and we have a frame to put it around. Like, oh my gosh, like that incredible male energy is like, there's a strength and intensity there that the feminine's kind of is just watching and observing with her extrasensory being. And I don't think there's anything wrong in that on either side. It just gives us a framework to talk about it and to say to our partner, hey, like, when your face was like that, like, are you really angry with me? And then, the partner says, no, I wasn't. And so you kind of learn each other's energies in that way. And I think we shouldn't get rid of that. I think that makes us dynamic and unique, and continuing to always learn in partnership and learn as people.
I have a question about that, about what can a man, let's say in 1 or 2 sentences, ask his woman? And right now we're physical distancing, social distancing. Maybe you're locked in the same kind of vicinity as your spouse, and maybe you don't want to be, or maybe you're not used to this much time. Or some men are actually have been sort of emboldened by the leadership that they need to have in this time. So it's really interesting what's going on right now. What's 1 or 2 sentences a man can say or ask his woman to open the door, or just peek into the box of this conversation of trust, and specifically facial expressions or the energy that he's holding when he's coming across? What can he say to help open that conversation in a calm, grounded way himself too?
Sure. Well, it's always going to be in the frame of like, he has not done anything wrong. He shouldn't have to change his energy. I think just saying, hey, how did that just affect you then? How did my tone of voice in that, how did what I say, how did that affect you and your body? Another one is, we've just had this conversation. What is your experience right now? Do you have feedback for me for how you are feeling or what you're thinking about?
Awesome. Do you have feedback for me, or how did that hit you? I'll even preface, I'll add on to there. I'm reading, I mentioned this yesterday too on our call. I'm reading Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. And in there he recommends starting with the words what or how. And you did that just now, Cynthia. And I'll add that at the beginning, what I found that's really good is set the frame as to where you want to go with this first. So I would love for us to be connected and for me to fully understand you. How did I come across just then? Or what were you feeling when we just had that conversation a few minutes ago? So if I label and set the frame first, which by the way, Cynthia, we read in these men's books, right? Stay in your lane, set the frame, be the energetic leader. So that's what I've noticed is if I lead with where I want this positive to go, I want us to have a great relationship. I want us to be able to share with each other. So I'm curious, how did that conversation that we just had hit you? Now, you see, it's a very open-ended question too, right? It's like, I didn't ask, was it okay how that went? I asked an open-ended question. So how does that come across to you, Cynthia, when I say that? I want us to have a connected, passionate relationship. So how does that come across to you? Go for it.
Yeah, that makes me feel like really open in my chest. Like a relief. Like, oh my gosh, I can share what that experience was like and it won't be considered wrong. But it's not something I just have to hold and then like, okay, hold my space, be self-contained, protect myself. That seemed really inviting to me.
So it prepares you for not needing to protect yourself necessarily. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, it's almost like we went arm in arm and then I led you toward, hey, open this up for me, please, right? Share this with me.
I'd almost, right now, I actually almost want to like cry, because it seems like such a compassionate invitation that I can only imagine other women are just, even as little girls, you're just aching for that opportunity to share your experience without it being wrong or bad. And I think that's why women get so closed off, is because they haven't had that opportunity, and their way of, of bouldering themselves up from that is to be like, all right, fine, I'll be tough. And then I won't feel this kind of vulnerability or inability to share in a softer, more emotional way.
In the chat, Dennis said he had angry nuns in grade school. I don't know if that's good or bad. Do you, I'll ask you another time if you have your girlfriend dress up as a nun. We'll save that one. And so, and Sohail asks, Cynthia, can you elaborate a bit more about masculine authenticity? What qualities in a man do you attribute it to?
Oh, that's an incredible question. To me, masculine authenticity is when a man is interacting with me and he's very clear on his purpose for interacting with me. And he is also very aware of and willing to be authentic with the emotions that he's having. And that he is not afraid to share, that his imperfections and his vulnerabilities as well. So it's like, okay, we're human to human. I know that you are a man and you have your masculine frame and presence, but you're also a human being who's willing to connect with me on a very real level, where you also see me and invite me to be authentic with you.
So Hale, if you have a chance to jump on and ask Cynthia if you have any clarifying questions. So Cynthia, sometimes when I coach a man one-on-one, I'll exaggerate, or I'll be facetious, or I'll really go one direction so I polarize the conversation, right? So you said that I should be vulnerable and authentic, right? So that means anytime I'm feeling insecure, I should just tell you, right? Anytime I'm not sure, I should just say that. Anytime, so I should just share all my insecurities with you, right?
Well, maybe you could share with me then, Jeff, like, because I know it's not about sharing all insecurities. So in men's work, what is the invitation there with, oh my gosh, I'm insecure about this, I'm not sure about what I should do with this. What do you coach men to do?
So what might be a specific scenario? You're saying just in general, if he has insecurities in general?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I noticed with a man with a lot of insecurities is he's not writing it down anywhere. He's not getting it out of his head. He's just perseverating on these turning thoughts over and over and over. So the number one thing I have a man do when I coach him is to literally send me an email, a 2 or 3 sentence, basically journal every single day as homework, to basically force him to journal every day. And I give him the framework of what I call the boardroom. So the boardroom is like, what's that movie, guys, where he goes into the kiddo's head and there's the emotions in the head and the emotions are kind of like pulling the levers. What's that called again? I think John's trying to answer. John, what is it called? What's the movie called where it's like, you know what I'm saying, right? Oh, is it Inside Out? Is that it?
Inside Out, yeah. That's what I was just trying to think of what it was. Yeah, it's Inside Out.
Inside Out. So my boardroom exercise is similar to that, but the emotions aren't behind the controls. Okay, the emotions are in your boardroom, sitting around an oval table, and they give input like a board of directors would. Okay, they don't actually have control of the levers unless you allow them to. And so to answer the question of what I do with this man with lots of insecurities, he's going to journal one sentence for 3 different persona in that boardroom. Okay, so one is the scared little boy. This is where you have anxiety. This is where you lash out. This is where you're probably feeling guilty about something, or you think that you're not good enough. Right? That's definitely one, the scared little boy. Another is the hummingbird. So the hummingbird wants to fix everything. It's like the nice guy as well, who wants to fix and what's wrong and what did I do and is everything okay, sweetie? Can we talk about relationship again? And she probably already told this man that she wants space. Right? If this man's talking to me, or if he's in our private group, or getting one-on-one coaching with a man like myself, or one coaching with you, Cynthia, he is probably incredibly worried that he's headed toward divorce. He's fearful of divorce, which is causing him to spiral in these hummingbird, as Steve Horstman would say, these hummingbird, basically nagging questions that are the same over and over every day. And it's driving her fucking crazy. Okay, so what he does is he gets these on paper. And the third one is a positive persona, which we call the mountain lion. The mountain lion is the man that you want to be. That's the man who's grounded. He's on his mission. As John Eldridge of Wild at Heart would say, the man needs to have he's on an adventure in life. He has a battle that he's fighting, and he has a beauty to behold. And the battle and the adventure are not the woman in his life. The woman in his life is the beauty to behold. The man needs to have an adventure he's on and a mission in his life that aren't her. She wants to be along in that mission. So the mountain lion in this boardroom is going to give feedback as the mountain lion would. Okay. So that's a bit of an elaboration on what I would have him immediately do, because he's perseverating on these things, and it's just causing him exponential anxiety. And as it just turns around and around in your head, the dragon gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we just have to face the dragon with me or with the other men, not with his wife. Okay, his wife is not his therapist. Your wife is not your best friend, guys. Okay, she's your wife. Of course, you want to have a friendship and a connection with her and a relationship with her, but she's not your guy friends, and she's not your therapist. And that was a mistake that I made in the past. I tried to make my ex, who's been over 5 years now, I tried to have her wear too many hats in my life. So that was a little bit long-winded, I think. Cynthia, how did that come across to you?
So I loved that. I appreciate what you shared, because it helped me kind of feel into, how a woman receives emotion from a man. And I had this image that like vulnerability is like we're doing our own work on the things that cause us worry, concern, stress, anger, and we're letting out the steam of that in personal practices, or working with a coach, or journaling. But we still are very, we honor the emotional experience we have. So it's kind of like we have it on a silver platter, and we can share that with someone, I felt really angry about this experience, and I just wanted to share that with you. Or, hey, I feel a little embarrassed sharing this, but this is what it is. So it's like an authentic sharing of where we're at, but it's kind of I'm doing my work here, but this is me sharing my authenticity with you. And then the other person can bring their plate to the table, and you can have a meal together and talk about it. But it's not as if you can't have a wonderful dinner party if you're both sitting in a windstorm. So the windstorm needs to have dissipated, and then you can bring your dish to the table. And then I have to say, your dish, your offering of hey, I as a man have feeling experiences too. I mean, the women, that's their honor, right? They're always honorable to the emotional experience. So for a man to be willing to share his, for a woman in her feminine, is a tremendous gift. It's like being given this beautiful plate of food to share and connect over.
Oh, I love that. I love that analogy. That's a great segue into one of our questions here. So let me go ahead and share that, and I'll read it. And Cynthia, I would love to hear your thoughts, your response. So this came from the forums. We were speaking yesterday. It says, Cynthia, yesterday you explained the metaphor of the sink filled with dirty dishes and how this represents a buildup of resentments and unknown wounds from the past. Would you please explain this again? And then what's a guy to do to start cleaning the plates? Thank you.
Well, we all can probably resonate with when the sink starts filling up with dirty dishes, it can cause all of us like anxiety, frustration. It can even be overwhelming because it's like, where do I even begin? If you let it sit too long, and there starts to smell. So the analogy is, hey, starting out in our relationships with one another, there are bound to be things that you as the masculine, it's confusing my femininity, and me as the feminine is confusing your masculinity. I can be confused by your masculinity because sometimes we just speak different languages and different things hit us in different ways. We can feel disrespected in different ways or dismissed in different ways. And that's okay because we just don't know. We haven't been taught this. But what happens is early in relationships, something gets dismissed or disrespected, and it's like a dirty plate put in the sink. And it's not talked about, and it just kind of sits there until the next dirty plate is created. And then before you know it, years and years go by, and these plates are full of all this emotional baggage. And then that's often when the woman says, like, I've had it, like, I feel like disrespected. I feel like this is not going the way I want it to go. This has just been horrible this whole time. And the man says, okay, well, can you give me specifics? Like, what exactly happened? And she can't speak of that. All she can say is, I have felt unaccepted by you and dismissed, and it's just this big ball of emotional experience. So how do we start like cleaning those plates? We, as I said yesterday, we often hold on to our pain just until we feel that someone truly understands us. So often a woman is just looking to be able to show a man a plate and say, this really, really hurt. And for him to empathize. And then the plate can be put aside. So it's kind of like, it's kind of cleaning one plate at a time.
So how does he clean one plate at a time?
Often going backwards. Like I heard a story the past couple of days of gentlemen saying, I try to ask the woman in my life to, share with me her plate. And she says, it's just like a big experience. I can't give you specifics. So it's kind of asking, hey, can we go backwards? What's the most recent time you felt frustration or hurt or pain? And I'd love to hear that experience. And then it's like, okay, well, what's the experience before that? And kind of going into it in a backwards way. And that's the way to kind of calm the emotional overwhelm she has.
Mm. Well, I can just picture some of the men that I work with saying, if I were to ask her to tell me the last time that she felt disappointment and pain, I might as well strap in because she's going to unload on me.
Mm.
What would you say to that, man?
What is the fear of the unloading?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, number one, it just hurts when she says these things that I don't agree with, that are damning to me, that I've never been a good man, that it's these catastrophic ways that she describes things. And she's never loved me. I've always been XYZ. I've always been an asshole. She's never been able to open up to me. So I guess what I'm saying is sometimes what happens is she catastrophizes the answer. Mm-hmm. And so she's not actually telling me about one plate. She's telling me about the entire kitchen full of dirty plates. Mm-hmm. How would you recommend he move forward there with her?
I think allowing her the space, because to her it's not catastrophizing. Um, it's just a built up ball of energy. And to just kind of allow the space for that built up ball of energy to siphon off a little bit, not taking on anything that is being said, but just allowing that some expression um, is really important, while also continuing to like phrase and frame for her, you know, what you're wanting in your relationship. I want to have a connected relationship where we communicate with each other, and then allowing the emotional water to kind of come down, and even inviting that conversation at regular times. So there's almost like a planned, when are we going to talk about this? When are we going to talk about this next? Here is my vision for our relationship. What do you want to share with me about that?
Kevin raised his hand. Kevin, do you have a question for Cynthia on that? Yeah, I mean, go for it.
It's just an interesting metaphor, because it's what I've been going. My wife came to me 3 weeks ago and asked for separation after 25 years, and a lot of stories. But about 3 years ago, I came out of a deep depression and found out that the marriage was in tatters, and a lot of the things that, you know, at that point got the, you know, I love you, I'm not in love with you, and, you know, I don't know what's going on. And in going through stuff, it was things that, like planning for the wedding, it was my attitude when I found out she was pregnant for our first son, who's now 23. And there were things that I didn't handle well, and but even back then I owned, and I, you know, emphasized, and I owned, and but 3 weeks ago, you know, she brought up the same things, and said that she can't get past them. She can't get past these things that are 15, 20, 25 years ago. Even though I've done a lot of work in the last 3 years, I can't get past those things, and I can't. You know, I've emphasized that. Listen, I've owned them. Yes, I did this. You know, and I apologize for it. And so you know, I'm just wondering if it's, you know, it's the same thing, or like what I think now is that maybe when I came 2-3 years ago, it was already too late, and we both tried, and you know, this has run its course.
Well, thank you for sharing that. As you were talking, I just felt some like ache and so much sadness in my heart. And I'm so sorry this is what you're going through. I am curious, when you empathize with her, can you share with me like what that process was like? What did you say to her?
You know, for some of these, it was the disconnection she felt and the aloneness she had. Like when, you know, we got pregnant a few months after our marriage, and it was in the plans, and I reacted really badly. And she felt, you know, she comes from another country, so she felt very alone and very unsupported. And that's what I tried to, you know, when we talked about it, that's what I tried to say to her, that, you know, I know that what I did made you feel unsupported and scared, unsafe. You know, it was like that. But then, right, wrong, or indifferent, I would go back and I guess try and I think a mistake I have made, which I'm learning about now, is that I would maybe not justify, but trying to explain myself and saying that, you know, I was very frightened and very scared, and I think that might have negated what you know, my reasonableness in trying to be understanding. I probably did kind of a yes, but yes, I know you felt you felt alone and felt frightened. But I felt this way too, whereas I should have just shut up and listened.
Yeah, you caught your ball sack in the zipper, Kevin. I think it's that. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And there's always two sides to this, right? There's, yeah, maybe as a partner you could have done X in that situation, but there's also the side of if she was feeling a certain way, it was also up to her to come talk to you about it. And it sounds like she didn't really have the skills for that as well. So, I mean, everyone's kind of holding equal ends of a relationship and preserving that, that their relationship together. If given the opportunity to continue having these conversations, there's something incredible that happens when someone shares with us an emotion and we can kind of even empathize in our body, like, oh my gosh, yeah, loneliness is one of the toughest experiences to have, and that is so hard, and I'm so sorry that you felt that. And then really just empathizing with gosh, what does that emotion feel like? When women communicate with each other and they share things, there's a lot of like, oh my gosh, yeah, like, oh, I understand that feeling. And there's an understanding between them of like, oh, I'm not alone in this experience. And often that shared like, oh, that sounds so difficult, that just, makes my heart hurt, is a way that a woman feels completely heard and completely understood. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just this person really understands on a physical level what that was like for me. And I can like let that bowling ball go because I'm not still trying to figure out how to make them understand how painful that was for me.
Kevin, I want to make a point that what Cynthia just explained, she didn't say any words. It was just being present in your body with her emotion and not trying to fix it.
No, I should have known this stuff a little while ago.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. Like I said, this was me 5-6 years ago too, Kevin. I didn't know any of this prior to that, to be honest. I didn't have eyes in the back of my head like none of us do. So at some point in our life, we're awakened to this. And at the very least, we can look at this as a positive of what's going on right now. At least we have become awakened to it at some point, at this point now. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, the two of you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I want to add one pragmatic tool. I'll call it, Cynthia has a beautiful, phenomenal, feminine way of describing something. And so I'll give the masculine way of describing it, which is don't stack, right? So no yeah buts, no positives and then negatives, no two negatives together, right? And honestly, generally, you don't need more than one positive together either. It diminishes the power of the one when you just add on. And I mean, I think I've read and seen and heard from women as well that if let's say it's the first date and you compliment her and compliment her and compliment her, you're putting her up on a pedestal, right? And also she starts to feel that every subsequent compliment is less genuine than the one prior. So that's don't stack. And then here's one other pragmatic tool with that. So there's you and there's her, and then there's the relationship, the third entity. Okay. So you don't want to stack talking about any multiple of those things generally at one time. So if I'm talking about me, I'm to what Cynthia was saying earlier, being vulnerable and genuine and saying my plan. I plan to journal about that. I plan to meditate on this. I plan to call the plumber. I plan to do this. So I can be vulnerable. Yeah, I really wish I knew how to fix a leaky sink or a toilet that just exploded everywhere and needs a plumber. I wish I knew how to fix that, but I don't. My plan is to call the plumber, and then you got to do it, obviously follow through. Okay, it's not this. Well, if you would have called the plumber yesterday, all of a sudden I'm stacking her, or Or, well, how come I always have to do everything in this relationship? Okay, and bringing multiple energies into it when it's completely not necessary. So for our male brains, if this helps, okay, if you're talking about you, stick with that and make a plan. If we're talking about her, you're present, you're not trying to fix, you're really not talking much, and you have to let the uncomfortable feelings sit. Even if she's just shooting, I want to say accusations, but even if my point is if she's shooting out emotions that are making you uncomfortable. If she's being abusive, then of course that's past a boundary. If someone's name calling or degrading you or something like this, that's too far. You speak up for yourself, don't be a doormat. But if she's just sharing, I've felt disappointed for this entire marriage, and she's sharing, and you have to let that wash over you, and that's going to help her trust you. That, like Dennis said, you're first of all, you're not sitting there with your hands shaking like she's afraid you're going to smack her, but that you can be there and be the man that can move through that with her. Okay, and then you're going to move through it with her, talking about the relationship in another segment of time. You don't stack. Cynthia, anything you wanted to add on to my little pragmatic tools there?
Well, thank you for your pragmaticism.
Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot. It gives me permission to be a lot more emotional. So thank you for that container. I guess the only other thing I want to add is when a woman is sharing that I've been disappointed my whole marriage, again, it goes back to that one of those first dishes that are put in the sink, where something about her authentic femininity, something that she was offering probably in a not a logical way, was she felt like it was dismissed or not as valuable. And so that one dish really is starting that tremor. And so she's kind of adding to that. And as much as that seems overly dramatic, and why can't she just let it go? I think we all find compassion for each other if a man thinks about the things that are the most painful and disrespectful to his masculinity. Again, it's different in the feminine, but we both vibrate with that same kind of like, oh, that totally got me in the most central place of me. And that's what we're in relationship to work on, is, healing those like daggers to the heart. That I think that's what we're in relationship with all people in our lives. And just to recognize that we're human beings, and although different things cause us distrust, it's the same emotional experience in each and every one of us.
Brett in the chat said, setting aside the ego can go a long way with emptying the sink. Yeah, no matter what is said, it can be handled with grace. He said that was a great answer that you had, Cynthia. Very good answer. And Andrew says, hi, it sounds like that is needed before any forgiveness can take place, ? Andrew, if you can talk for a moment, if you want to jump on and clarify your question. Are you saying that setting aside the ego is needed before any forgiveness can take place? Maybe even forgiveness of yourself. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, hi. It was just what Cynthia was saying then earlier on. And I was just thinking, when, was it Logan that was on earlier with the issues that he's got with his wife? I was just thinking, if before I was just wondering if before forgiveness can even start to take place with the female in that side, what Cynthia was mentioning, I'm going to lose my track here, is needed before a woman can even begin to start that process of forgiveness. Because I presume to get through all this, I mean, you have to learn to forgive your other partner to be able to move on in a positive way. You can't move on from a relationship with bitterness from both sides, because you'll never end up coming out of it well.
Andrew, I love that. And I love that you brought up the idea of forgiveness, because it's forgiving ourselves first is not a small task, but it's such a huge part of this, because in the end, we are all differentiated beings, and however the woman in your life is responding, she's also in charge of her own world. And so forgiving ourselves, and knowing in our goodness and our honor, and that no one can take that away from us, no matter what their experience, I think is so huge and so wise for you to point out. And then the other thing I think of is what you said, like this kind of expression has to happen first. Alison Armstrong has this amazing example of when a woman's really trying to share her experience in her very authentic emotional way. And I've heard like men refer to it, just like hold the barrel while she vomits into it. If that experience is like stopped and told it's wrong, it's almost like she's like having to like re-swallow the vomit. And I know that's a really graphic example, but I've definitely experienced that when I'm trying to really share something that's important to me and it's kind of cut off. It's like kind of going like that. So that was
that's almost like a dirty dish that goes into the sink.
Yeah.
And like an emotion that you're not releasing.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew. That was fantastic. I appreciate it. Beautiful. So Alison Armstrong, Andrew is asking, Alison Armstrong wrote the Queen's Code, and Cynthia could speak more specifically to it. Go for it.
Yeah, she's an incredible, incredible woman. She started out her programs called Understanding Men, and it's really about teaching women how to understand the men in their lives, and specifically putting a stop to women's habits of emasculation. She really calls women out on honoring the men in their lives, and how do you own your femininity and honor the masculinity in another. And so she has a lot of audios and a lot of books. I think she's incredible.
Cynthia, if you have 2 more minutes, I know we're at 12:02 right now. If you have 2 more minutes, I know men are thinking, how can I get her to read that book? What would you say? What would you say to that question? How can I get her to read that? It's kind of a trick question, a little bit of a trick question, I think.
So I'm pausing with your trick question.
I mean, I say trick question because if you say to your woman who's really upset with you, you should read this book. This is telling you how you're emasculating me and that you need to fix yourself. That's going to go over real good, yeah?
No.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. Yeah.
So my head's spinning, right? Because I'm always wanting to give the right answer, and sometimes I'm like, do I know the right answer? The first thing I thought of was she also has a book called Understanding Women, which I would recommend. My journey that started about 15 years ago is when I was just at a place of, yet again, another relationship had ended. I seemed to have thoroughly fucked up with a man. I thought I was doing a really good job. I thought I was asking for good space to heal, and he felt very abandoned and disrespected by me. I had to pull back and go, okay, what do I need to learn here? And I actually started listening to The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. I started learning about men and masculinity, and it opened my eyes, not so much in a now I perfectly understand men, but more of like, oh gosh, now I understand the polarity of myself in this. So I think when we learn about the other people in our lives, it serves a purpose there. More importantly, it teaches us about ourselves. And when you're very clear on who you are and the energy of relationship, it's much easier to then say, this is what I want, and this is my vision for us. And then support the person you're with whatever they might need or want to learn. That your knowledge of yourself and your vision of what you're wanting, that is a much more powerful tool than going to someone and saying, you're really screwing this up. You need to read this, which I'm sure you guys on the other end would not appreciate either. So.
Yeah.
I have a friend reading it now. I loaned it to her and she's loving it. But
which one?
Queen's Code.
Oh, nice.
But she's just early into it, but she's like, I'm loving this book. And again, though, there was no need to fix her or identify anything. So it was a little easier. We were having pretty cool conversation. So I offered the book up and she jumped at it.
Yeah, it was the same thing. Me and my wife actually read it over one of our date nights. We went out and read the book together and talked about it. It was kind of cool.
That's so awesome. I love the idea of having a book that a partnership they read together. It's like holding that third space of connection and growth. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I want to add, so Dennis, that's your friend. And John, you're doing really well with your wife right now. Yeah. And so let me answer the man that's not doing really well with his wife. And when he comes to me and asks, should I read that book? I love Cynthia's answer, which is, it's to learn about yourself, right? It's to learn about yourself and to understand. And here's my point. You might read Queen's Code to have empathy for her situation, and to be able to hold a vision within yourself of what a healthy feminine woman looks like. Because if you have no idea what that looks like, it's hard to even imagine it's possible. And that's one thing I love about Cynthia, you having you on here with the two of us, is these men get to see what an enlightened woman that's done her work looks like. Not that any of us are perfect. I didn't expect a perfect answer. I threw you a hard question there. But yeah, my answer is, you don't try to make her do anything. You read the book to understand where she's coming from and to have further empathy and vision, is what you said, Cynthia, and vision for the future of the two of you together.
That is such a gift, because vision has the power to not only move a current situation forward exponentially, but the value of it doesn't lessen even if that relationship doesn't continue. That gets to go with you wherever you go, in whatever relationship you're in. And I would say even in the relationship you have with like the person who's checking you out at the grocery store, like this is a gift that you can bring connectedness just to human beings and women of all kinds in your life.
I agree with that 100%. That book I've never felt more interested in a book until I read that book. And it also gave me a picture of what a healthy feminine woman looks like, but explained a lot of myself, like the single track focus and a lot of the characteristics that I have that I didn't know about in that book.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. There's a bunch about the stage of being a prince as a man and then moving into kingship as a man. There's a lot in that book. I agree with you. And understanding men is great for us to read. So guys, read both of them for yourself. Awesome. We will see you guys tomorrow. We're doing this every day, 11 to 12. Our theme of the week is trust. And I'll have a different Wayne's World clip tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you very much, gentlemen. See you.